Yeah, absolutely.
You wake up at 4 in the morning, you throw out everything in your pantry, you run 10 miles in the pouring rain.
Right, and the dramatic music is swelling in the background.
Exactly. And then you magically overhaul your entire existence by Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we are culturally conditioned to want our transformations to be loud and visible and just dramatic.
Because that makes for a great story, right? I mean, it's cinematic, but unfortunately, human neurobiology just doesn't actually operate on the cinematic rules.
No, it really
Generally.
doesn't. When you look at the actual psychology of high performers, that dramatic montage approach, it isn't just unrealistic. It usually causes a massive crash and burn.
Oh, absolutely. A complete burnout. It's unsustainable.
Right, so today our mission is to look at the invisible architecture of high performance. We have these fascinating notes summarizing the concepts of quiet habits. And we want to figure out how tiny, mundane routines running on absolute autopilot can radically reprogram our brains, preserve our cognitive bandwidth, and ultimately dictate the kind of person we become.
It really is a complete paradigm shift. We're moving away from those sweeping declarations and looking at the absolute definition of flying under the radar.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we can start optimizing our mornings or bank accounts, we really have to understand the underlying engine. Like, why is the human brain so ruthlessly obsessed with turning behaviors into automatic habits in the first place?
Well, it comes down to basic biological economics. The brain is an incredibly expensive organ to run. I mean, it consumes roughly 20% of your body's energy.
Wait, really? 20%?
Yeah, 20%, despite being just a tiny fraction of your body weight. It's a huge energy drain. And every conscious choice you make, you know what to wear, whether to respond to a passive-aggressive email now or later, what to eat for lunch. All of that burns physical metabolic energy.
Which leads straight to decision fatigue.
Exactly.
It is that feeling at like 3 in the afternoon on a Tuesday where you're staring at an Excel sheet and someone asks you a simple question, like, do you want chicken or fish for dinner? And your brain just short circuits.
You literally do not have the physiological resources to care anymore.
Where you've hit the wall, you are just cognitively depleted.
So to prevent you from reaching that crash by 10 in the morning, the brain evolved a brilliant defense mechanism. It takes repetitive behaviors and offloads them from the conscious, energy-heavy prefrontal cortex.
Okay.
And it moves them down into the basal ganglia, which is a region of the brain that operates on a fraction of the energy.
It's like the smartphone battery analogy.
Well, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, conscious decisions are like heavy processing-intensive apps.
Mm.
If you have 50 of those running simultaneously, your battery is going to be in the red by noon. So habits are the operating system's way of putting those apps to sleep so they don't drain the battery, which frees up processing power for the stuff that actually requires deep thought.
Spot on. When you automate the mundane, you preserve bandwidth for the meaningful. But the power of this automation isn't just about saving energy, it is about compounding momentum.
Right. The math of small actions. Like the source brings up a great example with the 10-page reading rule. Reading 10 pages of a book takes, what, like 15 minutes?
Yeah, 15, maybe 20 minutes max.
In isolation, it feels like it won't move the needle at all.
It feels almost too small to matter. You think, why even bother?
Exactly. But you run that tiny 15-minute app in the background every single day, and at the end of the year, you haven't just read a few chapters. You have digested 10 to 15 entire books. The compounding effect is just massive.
And what is fascinating here is the psychological shift that happens alongside that compounding math. Because you aren't just accumulating knowledge or checking boxes on a reading list, you are fundamentally redesigning your self-image, your identity.
This is where the concept gets really profound for me. Because we tend to think our identity drives our habits. Like, I am a healthy person, therefore I run.
Right, we assume the identity comes first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it is actually the other way around, isn't it? The behavior creates the identity.
Yes, exactly. The brain is inherently skeptical of sweeping internal declarations. You can stand in the mirror and shout, I am a voracious reader.
Right.
But if you haven't picked up a book in 6 months, your brain knows you're lying to it.
It calls your bluff.
It absolutely does. It requires evidence. So when you read those 10 pages every single day, you are casting a daily undeniable vote for a new identity.
You are providing the proof.
Right. Over time, doing the action consistently shifts your internal narrative. You stop being someone who wants to read more and you simply become a reader. Or, if you practice a language for 10 minutes a day, you transition from someone struggling to learn to an English speaker. The architecture of your habits literally builds the house of your identity.
Okay, so if these automated routines are the invisible bricks building our identity, we need to know where to lay the first one. And the consensus from the notes seems overwhelmingly focused on how we launch the day.
Because the first hour awake sets the neurochemical and psychological trajectory for the next 15 hours. If you get the launch sequence wrong, you spend the rest of the day playing catch-up.
Which brings us to the most universal, yet probably the most consistently violated rule of modern mornings. No screens for the first 30 minutes.
Oh, it is so hard for people.
It is so hard. The directives are, wake up, drink a glass of water to rehydrate, do a light stretch, pick exactly one main goal for the day, but absolutely do not touch the phone.
Yeah, and it is not just a productivity hack. It is about protecting your brain states. When you first wake up, your brain is transitioning from the slow delta waves of deep sleep into theta and alpha waves. It is a very fluid, relaxed, and highly suggestible state.
Right, because you haven't fully booted up the prefrontal cortex yet.
Exactly. So what happens when, in that highly vulnerable state, you immediately grab your phone, you let the chaotic demands of the entire world rush in and hijack your nervous system?
The urgent emails, the stressful news, the curated highlight reels on social media, all of it just pouring in.
All of it. You are instantly flooded with high alert beta waves. You go from 0 to a cortisol spike in about 3 seconds.
You are instantly in reaction mode. You are playing defense against everyone else's agenda before you have even figured out your own.
Precisely. By keeping the device out of the room for just 30 minutes, you protect that alpha state. You hydrate because, well, your biology demands it after 8 hours without water.
Right.
You stretch to send blood flow to the muscles. And by picking just one singular goal for the day, you give your mind a clear, fixed target before decision fatigue can even enter the chat.
It makes perfect sense. But let's bridge this to how we maintain the mind once the day actually starts. We mentioned reading a moment ago, but there is a compelling point in the source material about its physiological impact. Apparently, just 6 minutes of reading can reduce stress levels by over 68%.
Wait, really? 68%?
Yeah, that's what the notes say. Over 68% from just 6 minutes.
That is remarkably efficient. But it makes sense because reading demands just enough cognitive focus to distract you from your own looping anxious thoughts, but not so much that it triggers a stress response. It forces the brain into a state of active meditation.
And for anyone actively trying to learn a language, reading offers a massive structural advantage over traditional studying. We're talking about natural pattern recognition versus the absolute grind of rote memorization.
Oh, studying grammar tables. Staring at flashcards and drilling verbs feels like a chore. Because it is a chore, it burns a tremendous amount of cognitive battery for very little retention.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
It really is. But when you read a story, your brain is doing what it evolved to do. Recognize patterns in context. You absorb the architecture of the language, intuitively getting the stress reduction and the linguistic upgrade simultaneously.
But obviously you can't optimize the mind if the biological hardware running it is sluggish. Which brings us to the neurochemistry of movement. And I think the classic trap here is assuming an exercise habit means joining a CrossFit gym or training for a triathlon.
That is the movie montage trap again. We think if it doesn't hurt, it doesn't count.
Right. No pain, no gain, which is such a toxic way to look at it.
Exactly. But from a purely neurological standpoint, light movement, I mean, even just putting on a song and dancing in your kitchen while the coffee brews is wildly effective.
Because we aren't just burning calories, we are actively modulating our brain chemistry. We are triggering the release of critical neuromodulators.
Right. We aren't just talking about a fleeting mood boost. We are talking about releasing dopamine, which is essentially the brain's molecule of motivation and forward momentum. We are talking about serotonin, which regulates mood and focus.
Yeah.
Getting that hit from a 5-minute stretch sets a baseline of positive chemical momentum that carries over into your deep work.
But all this output, the cognitive focus of physical movement, the decision-making, creates a metabolic byproduct, which means we have to talk about the recovery phase. Sleep. I think a lot of high achiever types still view sleep as a necessary evil, like powering down a machine because the battery died.
Which is a fundamental misunderstanding of human biology. Sleep isn't an idle state. It is an intensely active biological process. Specifically, it activates the glymphatic system.
The brain's night shift janitorial service.
Exactly. Throughout the day, as your neurons fire, they produce metabolic waste. If that waste builds up, you get brain fog, poor memory, and eventually severe cognitive decline. During deep sleep, the brain actually shrinks slightly, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to wash through and clear out those toxins.
Wow, so it literally washes the brain.
Yeah, it physically cleans it out.
And it is not just a cleaning cycle. It is an organizational one, too.
Yeah.
Right? The source notes emphasize that sleep is when the brain physically moves information. like the new skills, the vocabulary you studied, the problem you solved. It moves them from fragile short-term memory in the hippocampus to permanent storage in the cortex.
Yes. If you cut your sleep short, to less than that 7 to 9 hour window, you are literally pulling the plug on the server while it's backing up your data. You lose the cognitive gains you worked so hard for during the day.
Which is why the architecture of a good day actually starts the night before. A consistent sleep schedule and the strict 30-minute ban on blue light before bed. Because the blue light from our screens mimics daylight, suppressing the melatonin needed to trigger that whole cleaning and sorting process. Bookending our days with 30 minutes of analog time seems entirely non-negotiable.
It is the foundation that allows absolutely everything else to function.
All right, so we have laid down the physical infrastructure of the morning, launched the movement of the sleep cycle. But some of the most powerful habits are entirely internal. The psychological routines running quietly in the background, specifically around how we manage resources and how we talk to ourselves. Let's dive into financial habits, because there's a fascinating link between money and cognitive bandwidth.
There is a massive body of evidence showing that financial scarcity, or even just the feeling of financial anxiety, temporarily lowers your functional IQ.
Oh, wow.
Yes,
Yeah.
when you are stressed about money, it consumes so much of your background processing power that you literally make worse decisions in other areas of your life.
It is that heavy app running in the background again, draining the battery.
Exactly.
So to close that app, we look at two classic automated behaviors from the notes. Pay yourself first, and the need versus want filter. Paying yourself first means the absolute second income hits the account, 10% is automatically routed to savings or investments. You don't even see it.
You remove the decision entirely. If you wait until the end of the month to save whatever is left over, you will almost always find a reason to spend it. By automating it, you enforce discipline without requiring willpower.
And the need versus want filter addresses the spending side. It's the ability to pause when a retailer screams 50% off and realize that if you didn't need the item yesterday, buying it today isn't saving 50%. It is spending 50%.
It is an impulse control mechanism. Retailers know how to trigger that panic in your brain. And what is crucial is recognizing that financial discipline and emotional discipline use the exact same neural pathways.
This is where we need to connect the dots, because shifting from money management to managing your self-talk sounds like a pretty big leap, but it is really the same muscle. Protecting your bank account from impulsive drains is conceptually identical to protecting your inner monologue from negative spirals.
Your inner monologue is essentially a feedback loop. Think about how the average person reacts to making a mistake. The self-talk is often brutally toxic. I'm so stupid I always mess this up. I'll never get this right. We say things to ourselves that we would consider emotionally abusive if a friend said them to us.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate on this a bit. I understand that beating yourself up isn't productive. But on the flip side, isn't there a danger in toxic positivity? Like if I completely mess up a major presentation at work and my inner voice just says, "You're doing great, buddy, no worries." Isn't that just delusion? How do you keep the voice positive without losing accountability?
That is a phenomenal distinction to make, because healthy self-talk is not about delusion. It is about objective observation versus identity assassination.
Objective observation versus identity assassination. I really like that.
If you bomb a presentation, the negative habit is saying, I am a failure. You are attacking your core identity. The productive healthy habit is saying that presentation went poorly because I didn't prepare the data well enough. I need to adjust my prep time for the next one.
Right, so you are evaluating the action, not the person.
You hold the action accountable without destroying the person. Cursing yourself just triggers an emotional stress response that drains your cognitive battery. Objective analysis preserves that battery so you can actually fix the problem.
That connects perfectly to how we should approach learning and building new skills. If we stop viewing mistakes as indictments of our character, we completely change how our brain processes new information.
Completely. And this brings us to one of the most effective yet underutilized learning architectures: spaced repetition.
The math on this is wildly counterintuitive to anyone who ever crammed for a college exam. The principle is that practicing a skill like a new language for just 15 minutes a day is vastly superior to a single grueling 2-hour session on the weekend. But wait, 2 hours is 120 minutes. 15 minutes a day is only 105 minutes. You are literally spending less total time but getting better results.
Yes, because you are leveraging the brain's biological rhythm of synaptic plasticity. Remember how we discussed sleep moving information into long-term storage?
Right, the nightly data backup.
If you study for 15 minutes, You stimulate the neural pathway. Then you sleep, and the brain physically strengthens that specific connection. You do that 7 days in a row, you get 7 distinct cycles of stimulation and consolidation, 7 save operations.
Okay, I see where this is going.
If you cram for 2 hours and sleep once you overwhelm the short-term memory buffer and a massive percentage of that data just gets dumped, you only get 1 save operation.
It is the difference between watering a plant a little bit every day versus dumping a gallon of water on it once a week. The soil can only absorb so much at a time, the rest just runs off.
Precisely. And in those daily 15-minute sessions, you have to lean into making errors. Especially for language learners, there is this immense fear of sounding foolish. But an error is not a failure. It is the literal mechanism the brain uses to calibrate.
Think of it like throwing darts at a board in a pitch-black room. You throw a dart and you miss the board entirely. The mistake is turning on the light to see where the dart landed. Oh, I'm too high and to the left. You turn the light back off and adjust your throw. Every single mistake is a crucial data point. If you refuse to speak a language until you are perfectly fluent, you're refusing to collect the data required to become fluent.
Exactly. A mistake is just a calibration tool.
All right, so we have mapped the architecture. The morning routine, the daily movement, the sleep cycle, automated finances, objective self-talk, and spaced repetition. The what is undeniable. Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because the what is rarely the actual problem. We all know we should drink water and save money.
Right, knowledge isn't the bottleneck. Implementation is.
Exactly. The challenge is installing these habits without relying on sheer willpower, which we already established is a finite resource. So how do we make them stick? The blueprint from our notes gives us 4 steps, starting with step 1. Start tiny.
Make the habit so laughably small that your brain's resistance doesn't even trigger. If you want to start exercising, do not commit to an hour at the gym. Your brain will look at its current energy levels and say, absolutely not.
It will find a dozen excuses why today isn't the right day. Oh, I have a slight headache. Oh, it looks like rain.
Right. Instead, commit to doing exactly 2 push-ups. Your brain looks at 2 push-ups and thinks, well, that takes 10 seconds, fine. You bypass the friction entirely. You just need to establish the neurological pathway of the habit first. You can scale the intensity later.
Step 2 is habit stacking. This is about anchoring the new tiny behavior to something you already do on autopilot.
Correct. You don't leave the new habit floating in a void hoping you remember it. You attach it to a reliable trigger. So while my morning coffee is brewing, I will do my 2 push-ups. The coffee maker becomes the automatic cue.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here again. Habit stacking sounds great in theory, but what if your anchor habit is chaotic? Like what if you have a toddler and your mornings are never the same twice? If the anchor moves doesn't, the whole stack collapse.
That is a very real challenge, and it is why you have to be highly strategic about your anchors. If your mornings are chaotic, don't use a morning anchor. Stack it onto something universally consistent, right after I brush my teeth at night or the moment I sit in my car after work. The anchor must be something that happens no matter what kind of day you have had.
That makes sense. Find the immovable objects in your routine. Step 3 is track progress. This is the visual element, like marking a big red X on a wall calendar. Every day you complete the habit, creating a chain.
It gamifies the process. Your brain loves visual evidence of progress. Seeing that unbroken chain of red X's gives you a microdose of dopamine, and eventually the desire to not break the chain becomes stronger than the resistance to doing the habit.
But let's be honest, life happens. You have to catch a 4 in the morning flight or there's a family emergency. Eventually the chain breaks. And for a lot of high achievers, breaking a 40-day streak is so demoralizing that they just abandon the habit entirely. They fall into the all-or-nothing trap.
This raises an incredibly important question about perfectionism versus resilience. And it is exactly why step 4 is the ultimate safety net of habit building. Never miss twice.
Never miss twice.
Exactly. Missing one day is an anomaly. It is a blip in the radar. The streak might be broken, but the identity you have built isn't. However, missing a 2nd day in a row is the neurological birth of a new counterproductive habit.
So the focus immediately shifts from, I must maintain a perfect record, to, I must execute a rapid recovery.
Yes, it strips the shame out of failure. When you miss a day, you don't engage in that negative self-talk we discussed. You just acknowledge it. Okay, yesterday was a wash. The only metric that matters right now is not missing today. It builds resilience directly into the system.
So what does this all mean? When we zoom out and look at everything we have unpacked today, from protecting that alpha brain state in the first 30 minutes, to the neurochemistry of kitchen dancing, to the compound interest of spaced repetition, it points to a truth that is actually deeply relieving.
It really is. Building a better future doesn't require a dramatic, exhausting overhaul of your entire life.
It doesn't require the movie montage. It is about the quiet architecture of tiny, consistent choices. It is the 2 push-ups attached to the coffee routine. It is the 10% quietly routed to savings. It is treating your inner monologue like an objective colleague instead of a harsh critic. These are the invisible bricks that build our identity.
And the beauty of quiet habits is that they don't demand a ton of energy in the moment. But when you step back 6 months or a year later, the structure they have built is monumental.
Exactly. So as we wrap up today's deep dive, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
Look closely at your current daily routines, specifically the things you do without even thinking. What is one quiet habit, good or bad, that is currently running on absolute autopilot in your life, and what kind of identity is it slowly building for you?
It is a massive question wrapped in an invisible action. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take that thought, maybe start with one ridiculously tiny action today, and we will catch you next time.